Can everyone hear me? Great. Thank you all for attending this special symposium edition of the Dean's Forum this morning. And thank you to Dean Kimbrough allowing us this time, and for Reverend Lewis for helping and organize this, as well as the Adult Education Committee. This year's symposium topic is Serving Downtown in a Changing Nashville. And we hope to address to you, our parishioners, the needs of our downtown neighbors in a city that has undergone vast changes in the past few years and continues to evolve. I'm Wynn Bassett, a vestry member and a member of the church's Adult Education Committee, and I'll be serving as the moderator of the panel this morning. And the committee and I have prepared several questions for our panelists. Some are for the individual panelists, some are for the panel as a whole. And with each question, we hope to begin a conversation in which all our panelists feel free to contribute. And we hope that some will spark questions from our audience. We hope to foster a coherent, flowing discussion wherever your questions, their answers, and their wisdom leads us. So to the audience, if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand or get the attention of Matthew with the microphone, and we'll get to you when we're able. So to begin with us this morning, we have Sarah Beth Myers, and just raise your hand, please, David Ewing, Jeff Yarborough, and Lindsay Creeks. And I'm going to ask each panelist now to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then end with what is the most significant thing you're thinking about this morning? It could be anything. What's on your mind this morning?
No pressure. I'm happy to start.
Great, thank you.
My name is Lindsay Creeks. I'm a reverend, and I'm co-founder of Open Table Nashville, which is an interfaith homeless outreach nonprofit. I've been working on the streets of our city for the last 12 years. Last night was out till almost 1 a.m. Just around your building, tending all the folks that didn't feel safe going into the overflow shelter or the other options because they feel like a jail sometimes. So tending folks, the thing I want to say is what I'm thinking about is not only how we can be committed as people of faith to the works of mercy, but how we can also commit ourselves to works of justice. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about today as people were freezing outside of our walls last night, and as we were out with them. How can we accompany them? How can we work for justice?
My name is Sarah Beth Myers. I'm an assistant United States attorney, and I work right across the street in the federal building. My specialties are white-collar crime, civil rights, and human trafficking. And in addition to that, that's my day job. My night job is I'm the founder and current board chair of Advocates for Women's and Kids Equality, or AWAKE is that nonprofit. And what I am thinking of, what's significant to me today, is really how we as a church can help bring in more women and kids and become a resource specifically for people who are suffering from abuse in our community, not just in the downtown area, but serve as a place where we can direct them to resources.
I'm David Ewing. I'm a ninth-generation Nashvilleian, a historian, future author, and what am I thinking of this morning? It's Sunday morning. I grew up at First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, under Kelly Miller Smith Sr., in our church building. Martin Luther King spoke many times. The civil rights movement happened in the building in the basement. The lunch counter sit-in trainings happened there, the nonviolent teachings of King and Gandhi. And I'm thinking of those times because Nashville looks so different now, and our needs are different, but we've almost forgotten what churches originally, particularly downtown churches, were about. And downtown churches, who their audience is. As the African American community was pushed out of downtown in the early 50s because of urban renewal, it's had a big impact on where the churches are and kind of how we minister today.
I'm Jeff Yarborough, parishioner here. I am currently in the Tennessee State Senate. I represent a lot of the people in this room, I hope. And even if I don't represent you technically, I'm happy to continue to represent you either way. So I'm currently the Democratic leader in the state Senate. That is not my better paying job. My better paying job is as an attorney at Bassberry and Sims. I grew up I didn't grow up in Nashville, but am a native Tennessean, grew up in Dyersburg. I think the thing that I'm thinking about this morning is that when we joined this parish, we actually lived in the Gulch. And when we moved into the Gulch, we lived in a 4-story building, which was the tallest building for a half mile. There were no sidewalks. There's an adult bookstore around the corner. And in 15, 16 years, we've legitimately seen the size of downtown double, and then double again. And it's going to have profound repercussions on the city. So,
Thank you all. My first question's to David. In the last 50 years, what do you believe are the 5 most significant changes to downtown Nashville? It can be fewer than 5, but I'm going to hold you to 5 just due to time.
Well, I'll talk about the last 25 just because it's just more pressing.
Okay.
The years 1994, 1998, 2001, 2010, and last year, 2018. So why 94? 94 is the year that the downtown skid stopped. That, before everyone was leaving downtown, the department stores, the movie theaters, even downtown, the First Presbyterian Church had packed up and moved out to Franklin Road. And during that time, really the only people that were left were the lawyers and the bankers downtown. But 94 kind of stopped the skid. 3 things happened. 1, the Ryman Auditorium reopened. 2, the Batman building across the street opened too as well. And on 2nd Avenue, Gaylord Entertainment built the Wild Horse Saloon, and remember they had river taxis. So people were betting on downtown. That didn't make us the it city, but it stopped the skid. 1998, we had a tornado. It hit downtown. It was all over national news. That impacted us because although we had some false starts in the 90s, remember Planet Hollywood, NASCAR Cafe, Hard Rock and all that, we thought we were it city, we weren't. 98 was bad because it looked like we were closed for business, and a lot of people said, well, maybe downtown's not going to be what it is. We were building a football stadium, and that had a huge impact on downtown. We should have had more momentum, but the tornado hurt us. 2001, we did have momentum. We probably should have been the it city. All these things happened in the summer of 2001. Across the street, the Frisk Center opened. Down the street, the Hall of Fame opened. Down the street that way, the downtown public library opened. 2010, the flood. Had a huge impact on downtown and just kind of how we respond to things and where we build and how we build. And of course, last year, the announcements of Amazon and Alliance Bernstein coming to downtown. 5,000 jobs right over there, you could see from the parking lot, and 1,000 jobs right over there for Alliance Bernstein. So the question is, who is Christ Church the church of? Are we the church of its city? Or are we the church of downtown, the people that used to be here that got displaced? My family used to live a few blocks from here on the corner of now Martin Luther King and 8th Avenue from about 1900 to 1950 until urban renewal. And so who are we ministering to? Are we ministering to all these people that live in the tall buildings now? Or are we ministering to the people that literally downtown is their home in their neighborhood and they don't have a bed? They have a cold slab of sidewalk and that is their home.
Thank you, David. Would any of the other panelists like to add any significant changes that you see or respond to David's prompt of who are we serving?
I'll go next, and I'm actually going to stand up for a second.
Yeah, please do. Feel free.
I'm going to try to put this in a broader context. So I want to talk for a quick second about just like how inequality works. I'm going to do some visual aids. So I'm going to let, he's our top 1%, okay? Just like all the priesthood are. I'll put Don Dawson in the back as the lowest rung on our 1%. And let's see, somebody volunteer. Okay, Mr. Brandt, you can be our median income. So I'm going to give Don $30. I'm going to give Bob Brandt, I'm going to give him about $50, and I'm going to give Matthew here $1,700. That's how income works, inequality works for the top one, inside the top 1%. So that's the top 0.1%, so the person who makes $15 million, and that's the 300,000 earner. All those are actually just in this one person. So now all that wealth is him, and he gets about $100. Now, if I'm not just talking about 1% and talking about the whole of the country, the top 1%, I'm going to give $100, and I'm going to give Don $1.50. And I'm going to give the median, I'm going to give about 7. It gets even worse if you start thinking about it in terms of how property works. So I brought 5 boxes of donuts. Matthew gets 2. The next 2 rows here get 2. They're not real donuts, by the way. Everybody over here, y'all get to split this one, and y'all owe them donuts. Here, I'll take your empty donut boxes. So that's genuinely true. So the top 1% owns about 38%. The next 9% owns about 38%. And, the next median owns the remainder, everyone over here, negative net worth. That really, I think, explains a lot of the political volatility that we're in right now. And the other thing that really matters to this is understanding how much place matters. So recessions happen every decade and recoveries happen every decade. In the 1990s recession and recovery, about 80% of counties in the United States had a recovery that was about the same as the national average. After the 2000 recession, about 60% of counties in the United States had a recovery that was at the national average, and about 40% were below the national average. In the current recession recovery, about 40% of counties have actually picked up steam along with the national average, while 60% are at about where they were at the height of the recession. So opportunity has concentrated dramatically and significantly in a few places, and we are one of them. This is an opportunity center like almost no other. That's sort of the it city. We're one of these 25 places where everyone wants to move. The challenges there are that opportunities are here, but how do you get to them? Because if you can't afford to move into the town, how do you take advantage of the opportunities? The other piece is we live in a world where education is the maker of opportunity, and the quality of schools typically right now reflects the income of the neighborhood in which the school is located. So we've concentrated opportunity in very few places, and you'd be hard-pressed to find any part of the world that has more theoretical opportunity than this. But the question I think we have to address as people who are beneficiaries of that opportunity and stewards of that opportunity is, who's it an opportunity for? Who really has a shot at participating in the city of Nashville in the next decade, the next century? Is it only going to be the people who are moving in because they're brought in by Amazon? Is it going to be the people who were in this city and stuck it out during the times when the city was when there was massive white flight and the city's economy was struggling? Is it going to be people who who are renters who see their income, who see their incomes may be increasing some, but their rents are increasing, at a much faster clip? I think figuring out how that's going to affect our city and what our responsibilities are both in this church, and let's be clear, like everybody in our church, we all at least get donuts, in my example. We have a special responsibility to think through what being people who are responsible and who have benefited from all this city has to offer, what our obligations are to each other, to the other people in our community, and how to welcome those who are coming in.
Thank you, Jeff. Related to Jeff's donut example and his mentioning opportunity has been concentrated, I have a question for Lindsay. How do you communicate with the people you serve about this type of abundance and scarcity?
So abundance is for the rich and scarcity is for the poor in our city. What charity is, and so many of our nonprofits and our churches love charity and love mercy, but what charity is crumbs from the table of abundance. What justice is a place at the table. You're in a city, we are in a city, we love a city right now that is subsidizing wealth, subsidizing without any requirements. Amazon, come on in, here's $30 million, bare minimum, for your building, for what you're doing, with no requirements for how you're going to invest in housing, for who's going to get those jobs. Come on in, Alliance Bernstein, come on in. Let us subsidize most of the luxury condos in the Gulch, y'all, including 505 Church on Church Street. They received tax increment financing, which was really intended to pull up struggling areas. Let us subsidize wealth while we criminalize poverty. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting prison or coffins. I'm burying people every couple weeks in our city. I'm burying them. So there is no abundance for our people. There is no equity for our people. Jeff mentioned rising rents. In the last 10 years, our rents in Nashville have doubled. They have gone from around $700, $750 a month to over $1,400 a month. What have wages done in the same time, friends? Anybody know if our minimum wage has upticked at all? Our minimum wage has stayed the same. It is $7.25, the lowest minimum wage in the country. There is a problem here. One of my dear friends, I do education work because I believe that in order to break cycles, we have to understand cycles of poverty. And I do a lot of education work, and the other week I was at a class at Lipscomb, and my friend Howard, who is currently unhoused, was talking with me, and he said, the cruelest thing that has ever happened in this nation is slavery. But even the slave masters knew you had to have housing. And here's the thing. He said, you enslaved my people back in the day. You're incarcerating them now. But tell me how this checks out. Back in the day, I was slave labor. Now I'm worth $7.25 an hour. My disability is, if you get disability, sometimes it's as low as $770. Nobody can make it on that. So we communicate abundance and scarcity by saying the only way to shift things is for people to come together and take back their power and to organize together to shift things for justice. As people of faith, many of us believe that the kingdom, and I say kingdom with intention, kingdom of God, is not this pie in the sky after we die, right? But it's also something we're called to pray about. Let the kingdom of God come here on earth as it is in heaven. And if the kingdom of God is to come here on earth as it is in heaven, then that means that we need to be creating a society where the last are first, the poor are blessed, and everybody has access to housing and health care and basic human rights. So and if we're going to do that, we have to organize ourselves because power isn't given and equity isn't given without a struggle. And I come from people of struggle. And my people that I serve are people that know struggle well. So that's kind of how I approach that question.
Thank you, Lindsay. Sarah Beth, you also help serve people who struggle. Can you comment on the specific needs for women and children in downtown Nashville, and how might a faith community fit into helping them?
So there are a couple buzzwords I'm supposed to use, and I want to make sure that I do that. Party barge and pedal tavern.
Nice.
Which, when I walk out of the building at night, of the federal building, and it may be with other attorneys, it may be with witnesses that I've been working with that day, maybe after a trial, very serious thing I'm coming out of, and then what comes down the street is, the hot tub full of people. It doesn't matter what weather, apparently, but in various states of dress, and woo, you hear that a lot. Sadly, though, with all of that frolicking and joy, which at least on the surface it appears to be joyful, there is a very seedy underbelly to all of that. And that is that we are one of the human trafficking hubs in the nation. Those are cases that I am prosecuting, and that actually it takes years to build some of those cases. But it's right under our noses, and it's right here on Broadway. In addition to that, domestic violence is one of the biggest challenges that our city faces. And when we have frolicking and merrymaking and strangers meeting up in bars, and the bachelorette capital of the country, which we are now, we have a lot of date rape, we have a lot of sexual violence, and we have a lot of things that are not being reported. And people don't know where to go. They simply don't know who to talk to. And when the sun rises, what do they see? What is a beacon for them? What is an opportunity? This building is so visible and is right here where all of those party barges roll by and those pedal taverns. And at least recently, what I can tell you working across the street, what my colleagues are talking about, when this church is visible, and when it puts signs out and says, tours at noon, or the breast cancer awareness, the ribbons that were blowing in the wind, when those barges roll by, it catches people's eyes. This is a place where people can come. It is a sanctuary, quite literally, where they can feel safe and where they should be able to come in and say, I have a problem. And a lot of people are raised to say, keep that within your home, any issues that you're having. But this could be an opportunity. Don't stay silent. Come here and tell us what your problem is. Did you experience sexual violence last night? Is someone in your family or a roommate hurting you? Where do you send people? There are so many resources in this city. We can be available and open to direct people to where they need to go. And one of those places is right down the street on a bus line, and it's the Family Safety Center. They do orders of protection there. They provide counseling. They help people get police reports. We can be directing people as a hub of where they can go. And I'm going to provide a list of those resources so that at the front desk, when these doors are open and people come in, we can tell them where they can go to get help. And that is one of the biggest services I think that this property, this visible property right here, can offer to the Nashville community, tourist and resident alike.
Thank you. Sarah Beth just spoke about tourists and others, and we've mentioned the growing population of people living downtown and working downtown. And I think serving all the populations downtown will necessarily include them as well. So to everyone, how do we as a faith community connect to all these different pockets of people, tourists, young professionals, those experiencing homelessness, and how do we connect them with each other as well? That's for everyone, whoever wants to take that first.
One of the biggest problems we have, and it's counterintuitive because we think about this as having all these people, and there are so many more people than there used to be, but so many of the actual problems that we face actually stem from people being totally isolated and alone. If you look at causes of death right now, suicides are up, death by through alcoholism is up, the opiate epidemic being a very good example. I mean, I think you could probably explain our politics with people, too many people sitting and watching either side's cable TV for 24 hours a day alone, rather than actually like communicating with human beings. I think that the challenge for all institutions, and especially one like this, like the church, is to find ways to build communities that can provide people with the support they need, with the easy access, the welcome that they don't find enough places in the world right now.
I think it's as simple as what you said, a sandwich board outside sometimes, inviting people in, saying, come inside, this is what's happening. During the marathon, your Baptist neighbor across the street had people with signs saying, use our bathroom, here's some breakfast, here's some water. They wanted people that were about to run the marathon from all over the country to come in, and their building was open for them. Now the question is your building open for the people that's living under a bridge, that really doesn't have any food, that might be just forgotten? And so as you look to build buildings for the future and think about how the church will be, are you building for the future and building for the it city? We should be looking back 20 years ago and seeing who is living on the streets, and they need help too. It's easy to take care of the shiny buildings and the cranes and look at what our neighbors are doing, across the street, and everyone's building is this arms race and cranes and all this, but the people that really need the help are the ones you might have to go out and find at night and tell them that this is an opening, inviting place. And yes, even tourists. We have all these tourists that come to town. They have religious needs. Things happen to them. Or they just want a home. On a Sunday morning, they want somewhere to go. On the Ken Burns documentary, there was a long talk about kind of the dichotomy of country music, Saturday night, which was the Opry, and then, of course, Sunday morning, which was the long religious themes of country music. And so these two areas that are just 12 hours apart, really, how do we look at Saturday night, which is Lower Broadway, versus Sunday morning, which is here? And maybe, just like the old days of Tom Ryman, who built a tabernacle for religion, and he would be horrified at pedal taverns and party barges and all this other stuff. He would just be beside himself. But maybe that's part of the growing ministry of the church. It's temporary. These are people passing through, but you can make a difference.
And on that note, we have this transient population as well as more people who are living downtown. It's such an interesting combination, but to open up the doors during lunchtime, this is actually something I've heard from the hundreds of people who work across the street. They go to eat lunch at the Frist because the Frist is there and it's available, and they want to get out of the building for a while. But apparently, from what I understand, many years ago, there used to be kind of a lunch and learn that would occur one day a week. I think it was Wednesdays, some of my colleagues were saying, and that the doors would be open, people would come in, and there would be a theme. And people would be discussing, much like we are here, a topic that is very relevant. And it could be any number of things facing Nashville or facing our society at large. Justice and politics. Ooh. Something that would really interest people who could either brown bag and bring it over, or people who, we could partner with Frothy Monkey, a downtown business, and they could come in, and it could be coffee talk. But I think so much of that visibility is due to having the open doors and a sign out front for a purpose. Some people won't come in to pray at first, but they may come in to have a talk about something that is interesting to them because they want to get out of their building and they want to have community. And it's right here, and it's a beautiful space. And if this is their entree, then whatever it is, if it's a cup of coffee or lunch with their coworkers, it's a start.
Thanks. Lindsay, in a growing city like Nashville, what can be done on both the micro and macro levels to help with the issues of homelessness? And what can faith communities like us be doing to help?
So we are, with Open Table Nashville, we're not just trying to keep ourselves in business. We're trying to work ourselves out of a job. We're trying to create a radical culture of care in our city that functions on the micro level and looks like kindness. It looks like instead of rolling our window up when we get to that meeting and there's someone standing there acting like we're on our phones, because we've all been there, it looks like being prepared and having some extra stuff in our car with us when we come to church or when we're driving around and we know we're going to see people. And doing what Dorothy Day says, thinking about the gospel is realizing that the gospel does away with that false narrative of the deserving and undeserving poor. Jesus did not tell us, when you visit me in prison, but when I was only there for white-collar crime. Then it's me. But all those other things, it wasn't me. No, Jesus says when you reach out to the stranger, will you do that to Christ? So what can you carry with you in your car? Can you put thermal socks and hand warmers in the winter? A McDonald's gift card? I gave a McDonald's gift card to a woman last night, a single woman who had on 2 thin layers last night, who had not eaten, and that McDonald's gift card was like a lottery ticket to her. It gave her choice and warmth and dignity. How can we be prepared to be kind on the micro level in all of our interactions? Because even a smile to that person who is panhandling or asking for money or whatever, even a kind face can change somebody's body chemistry. It's incredibly powerful. I also want to specify there are rich and poor panhandlers alike, so I don't really like just thinking about our impoverishments. On the macro level now, kindness and care on the macro level looks like justice again. And this is where we have to be educating ourselves. We've got to be looking at other cities to see, you have a community land trust. You have a municipal land bank. You have a housing trust fund, which we've developed here, but it's underfunded, right? You are housing our folks on the streets through a housing first model, where it says you don't have to jump through all these hoops to get into housing. We know that housing people is less expensive than keeping them on the streets because of the crisis services, the emergency rooms, the jails. Even shelter costs are expensive, right? Housing people is actually cheaper. So we're going to house people first, and then we're going to surround them with support and care to make sure that they have what they need to address those underlying things like their trauma, right? The mental health issues that many of us have. We just have housing and support and safety nets and insurance. So we're looking at these things, and I would say if you're not already educated about those things, start following groups like Open Table Nashville, like NOAA, like A Voice for the Reduction of Poverty. There's an organizing group called PATH, People's Alliance for Transportation, Housing, and Employment. Follow us, and we are putting out calls to action. We go to city council. Many of you in this room are powerful, and you know powerful people because of your long-standing roots in the community. How can you leverage those relationships when change matters? When we're sheltering people at the jail and they're not going. Less than 10% of the people that I encountered last night would go to Metro's overflow shelter at the Harding Detention Facility because they said it feels like a jail. How can we leverage our collective resources and power to listen to the voices from the streets and make a change and really set our priorities straight?
Thank you, Lindsay. We actually had a question submitted by Noah beforehand, and it was on the topic of how can a well-connected congregation like us make affordable housing a priority. So thank you for addressing that. We haven't spoken much about criminal justice needs. We've just touched on it a little bit. So to Sarah Beth, processing at the jail, there's ways to help there, and at the juvenile center. What can we as a faith community be doing to help in these areas?
There's so many volunteer opportunities, and some are available downtown, some are probably closer to where folks live in the community. One of those places is the Gene Crow Advocacy Center, which is basically right in the criminal court. They have volunteer needs there. They serve predominantly folks who are there specifically for domestic violence. They need help going through the process, getting to the courtroom. The training is quick. You can do one day. There are a number of other programs that you can volunteer for. Tennessee Prison for Women always needs volunteers. They always need services. Same with the Juvenile Detention Center. If you can spare an hour or an hour and a half to go and help with programming for kids, if there is a group that you work with outside of the congregation and you think, I work with Big Brothers Big Sisters, I think we could go in for an hour and we could work with some of these incarcerated children, that would be an hour. Or you can volunteer selfishly with Awake, and we teach classes to at-risk youth specifically on building healthy relationships and finances, because those two things are crucial to having success and to breaking the cycles of poverty and violence. Healthy relationships and finances. Why do people stay in unhealthy relationships? Because usually there's a financial reason involved. It's child care related. They can't just leave these unhealthy relationships, and they have to know what a healthy relationship looks like. You all can volunteer for an hour and meet with these kids and change their lives, and it's very easy to sign up to do that. And once you sign up once, you'll be hooked. You'll volunteer more than once. But it's little things like that where you might even not realize the impact that you're making in just an hour of donated time after work or over your lunch break. We all have these small pockets of time where you could be eating a sandwich at your desk, or you could be just going straight home from work, or skip that one day at the gym just one time and go and meet with some of these kids. I'm happy to stay after and talk to anybody about volunteer opportunities, but what this church specifically, I think, could be doing, and a desperate need that I see working with survivors of violence in the community, is to help maybe hold hands with some other churches and figure out how we can fund emergency beds for people, not just in homelessness, but mental health related, and specifically drug addiction combined with mental illness. There are people who want to get off of heroin today in the trafficking context and in a number of other contexts. And no matter how many places we call for an emergency bed, they're always full. And that is your window of opportunity. They need help now. When they're asking for help and they need an emergency bed, the definition of emergency is it has to happen now. Like, we can get you in a couple of days. They're back on the street and they've already had their next shot. And that could be a fentanyl-laced shot, and they could be dead in 2 days. I realize that's very dark, but that is the reality of what we need. Mental health and drug addiction related facilities, downtown, emergency beds now. So if that's something that we could work on, I would love to see that.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. I have many more topics I want to explore, but we're here for you, so I'd like to hear from the audience at this point. Any questions? And there's one in the back. And we have a microphone right here. Matthew will come to you.
I'm an educator, and one of the biggest needs I see, I read the Nashville paper this morning, the Tennessean. It's embarrassing that the city is having a wish list for teachers, and that wealthy people can adopt a teacher. And when I was teaching public school, which I did for many, many years, as a special education teacher, every year my taxes, deductions for what I bought from classroom kids in school, clothes, supplies, everything else, equal about 1 month's take-home pay. And apparently, I think with education can make a huge difference. Probably everybody here has seen the U of Tennessee thing that one teacher saw one kid being bullied, and it went viral, and that just makes a huge impact. But teachers can make a lot of difference. But apparently in Nashville, for some reason, it's hard to get people who want to live here and be a teacher, because I think the salaries are low. And if your salaries are low and you have students that don't have a home, then you're going to end up spending money that you don't really have or hope. And so I don't know what we can do about raising teacher pay, but it's huge. One teacher can make a huge difference in kids.
Anyone like to respond to that?
I mean, I'll jump into it at some level. I don't think there's any question but that ensuring that kids are getting good education is one of the most important things that we can do as a city. It is something that even people who are boosters know that we fail kids every day and every year. We have to do better at it. We need to be better at supporting teachers, paying teachers. I was at a conference recently that happened to just be with, next door to a teacher conference, and met an average 7th grade teacher from a northeastern state that's ranked in the top 3 for, education, and just we ended up talking about she's a 7th grade teacher that makes $100,000, and I was like, wow. That's different. I mean, you think about what you're, there's a sense of what you value that does come into play. I think that we have to do a lot more to focus on the equity of education across our city too. And I mean, there's so many issues tied up with that we could talk for 3 hours about it, but yes, I think if Sarah Beth doesn't have all the volunteer opportunities that you can find, you can literally find 100 schools in this county that could use your help.
We could adopt a school.
Right. And I mean, I think it also really matters for this area. Where we've got 1,000 people, thousands of people who are moving into downtown. Now, I'm sure that a lot of that's, hipster millennial kids, but theoretically, they're going to grow up at some point and have children. Do they stay downtown? Where do you go to elementary school downtown right now? I don't know. Where are we zoned? I mean, I think there's lots of questions like that where we just don't even, our physical community is not really the community that we always live in here in the church.
Thank you. Oh.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Christina Calloway, and as a mother, educator, all around Renaissance woman to be. One of the deepest concerns that I didn't hear addressed is about the foster and adoption crisis that we currently have right here in Middle Tennessee. I'm an adopted mother, and in the time that it took me to adopt, I saw our problems nearly triple. The human trafficking is very real, especially among our younger children. So for those of you who think I'm a mother bear, it's because I've actually been in circumstances where people have tried to rip my boys away from me in broad daylight. It is a huge concern, just the level of what goes on in our society, and it's not really being spoken out. I feel as though our foster adoption groups have no voice, very little advocacy, very little awareness about what is really going on. And they're the most impoverished. Our children in poverty has grown by leaps and bounds since 2005. And in addition to that, being that we're a closed adoption state, of course, we have very conservative views, and none that I disagree with, but it becomes a lengthy process and actually holds up the progress of getting onto the business of raising children. And with this comes my question. What can we do about making sure that those who are willing to reach out, whether it's, I was just looking at the advocacy center that you were talking about, those who are ready and willing to reach out, that they also have the support that is needed to continue on their process, because I've seen so many people give up. And that's one of the reasons that, as I was talking with the caseworker, said she's seen a lot of children who were adopted actually coming back into the system because they did not receive support, which overloads us in so many other ways, and also
There is a lot wrapped up in that question. That is an excellent question. And in terms of what you've seen, I would personally like to meet with you later, if we could, to have a more detailed talk about this, because one of the groups that my nonprofit is desperately trying to reach are those groups of kids who are sort of lost and who are being fought over in the middle. We've worked with some temporary homeless shelters for families locally to have our classes like that. What I would like to see is have a curriculum for people who are currently considering being foster parents, to know what the signs are to look for so that that can be reported in terms of human trafficking. What does it look like? Because so many people think that it's, college-age students that are being, abducted while they're studying abroad. That's not what it is. It's low-hanging fruit, people who are vulnerable and who are maybe already addicted to drugs, who are teenagers in the foster care system, who need someone to be a mentor to them. And we need education, and then we need policy change. And that's where Senator Yarbrough over here can come in as well. No pressure.
Sure.
Because it's people who are in the system who can identify the holes in it. People who are closest to it, who are foster parents, who are adoptive parents, who can say, this law makes no sense. This law needs to be changed and will help these children and will help these families. And until people are educated about what to look for in violent relationships, unhealthy relationships, human trafficking, sexual assault, sexual abuse, all of those topics, when they're going through the process, and then they can actually identify the policy issues that need to be changed, it's those two things that have to happen. You have to identify it through education, and then we have to do something about it from a policy level. And so it's groups like yours, people like you who are in it, that we really need to be having conversations with to identify where those holes are, and we can fix it from both a policy and an education level.
Thank you. Other questions? There's one in the back.
Mary Lee, I think we're unique because we have this entertainment district that is bigger than Beale Street ever was in its heyday, or Bourbon Street in its heyday too, and now hotels all around it, that this is the front door of Nashville, and we should be kind of reaching out. It doesn't have to be a neon spinning sign like on Lower Broadway, but it has to be something that says we're here for you no matter where you live, no matter if you don't have a home. Even the church across the street is building a rooftop deck, some sort of worship deck, apparently the paper says. You've got to know your neighborhood. And I grew up in a very kind of well-heeled elitist church, First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, but we did not have an elitist attitude toward the community. We were always social justice, civil rights, helping out people. This church had a split in about 100 years ago because you were charging rent for church pews for wealthy families. And a group of people split off and created an Episcopal church on Music Row, which is now Ocean Way Studios. And so you really have to kind of examine who are we ministering to and who do we want to minister to. But if this could be the church that's open, there's so many tools that we didn't have, social media and all this. It doesn't even cost any money. Put out a sign, put out some tweets. Tell people you want them to come here. Mm-hmm.
So I think the question, are there any?
Yeah.
What we have, the panels we represent pieces of the life of Nashville, working in Nashville and around us. But from inside the church, the cathedral has various ministries that are directed, like wayfarers, like downtown engagement, that are directed that activate the space around the cathedral and make us more engaged with our downtown community. But there's also a lot to be said about what other churches are doing it well, or where we can learn from, where some we improve upon.
The bill.
Develop
Both
tools.
of
So I've got one final question for each of our panelists here. In 30 seconds or less, what can the person in the audience right here do tomorrow to help serve downtown? In 30 seconds. Jeff?
Wow, 30 seconds. I think first about what you can do here. How often and how open can we unfurl the doors here to be at great risk as a politician? The fastest growing religious group in America are people that no longer claim a religious group. Is there a way that we can open our door to those people and the people who live, work, and play outside our doors?
Thank you.
It's very easy. Volunteer, support, give money to organizations that feed, house, and educate people. Those are needs downtown every day.
Look at your schedules, your very busy schedules, and find those spaces of time during the work week when you can donate an hour, and then pick your cause. And it can be women and kids, it could be homelessness, but pick it and then make that your mission. And you can do that once a week.
I want to first say that when I was talking about wealthy panhandlers, I was thinking more about Amazon than the people on the floor. I just want to be really clear about that. But I want to say, think about Basil the Great says, the clothes we hoard in our closets, the food we store up in our pantries, all the extra things we have belong to the poor. So I want you to go home and see what extra blankets and thermal socks and camping supplies and sleeping bags and jackets and gloves you have. Those are the items we need the most. We gave out everything we had in this last cold spell. We have nothing right now. Like, I literally emptied out our office of those items. So if you have those things, do a drive with one of the ministries here for us, and get more involved. Follow our groups on social media, because that's how you'll see the calls to action and education. And keep doing works of mercy, but also works of justice.
Thank you. Please help me show our appreciation to them.
Sarah is so